ahead and load.
This meeting is being recorded.
Understanding cold climate heat pumps technologies will be crucial to making a transition. So I will let Stephen take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. There we go. There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here speaking to you, homeowners in this great province of ours, and I hope that I can enlighten you to some information about this technology that may be able to help you heating and cooling your home so that it is less expensive and much more comfortable for you to live. So today, I'll give you a little bit of background on Mitsubishi. We'll talk about the history of the heat pumps. We'll obviously go over energy efficiency. We'll talk a little bit about carbon emissions. We'll look at some of the product and the application of these systems, and then I'll show some installation highlights. So, as Marianne mentioned before, my name is Stephen Cornelius. I'm the business development manager for our residential product in Ontario. Mitsubishi Electric Canada is a proud company who has a strong vision and mission where we stand behind our product and we live by our name. So it's very important to us that when a system goes in, it goes in properly and that it lives up to our reputation. So that is something that people can be assured of when they choose a Mitsubishi product. We go by MESCA, which is Mitsubishi Electric Sales Canada. We're a Canadian subsidiary of a Japanese company. We were established here in 1979. We're highly involved in a lot of sustainable initiatives, and we're involved in many organizations such as the Canadian Green Building Council, the Canadian Home Builder Association, Active House Canada, Passive Buildings Canada, Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, and we work closely with Natural Resources Canada. So, simple question. What is a heat pump? Where do they come from? Why hasn't your cousin heard of them? I get this question all the time. Mitsubishi is better known for automotive, but it is a large company that makes a lot of different things, but heat pumps are, it's a technology and it's a appliance that more people should know about. And the rest of the world is very familiar with them. It's North America that, has been slow to uptake heat pumps, but we'll go over this and we'll see the benefits of them. So artificial refrigeration, which is what heat pumps are based on, was first demonstrated in 1748. So we're not talking about new technology here. In 1857, a gentleman called Peter von Rittenberg out of Austria created the first heat pump system. In 1940, a gentleman in the US, Robert C. Weber, developed the first ground source heat pump. And then the first mini split was introduced in 1968. So as any technology, it's ever evolving. Our phones used to be corded and attached to a wall in your kitchen. Now they sit in your pocket and you can surf the internet with them, and they're basically computers. So it goes without saying that heat pumps have gone through a transformation throughout their time since 1968. So the image here just shows, what one of the original splits looks like, and the one on the right is a current indoor unit. So Mitsubishi Electric actually developed the first mini split in 1968, and then in 1985 we introduced it to Canada, and then in 1987 we introduced ductless models. We started cold climate systems in 2012, and our most recent development is having a unit that can give you 100% capacity at -20. So now you can't have a conversation today without talking about energy efficiency. And when we're talking about heat pumps, then we're comparing them to all other forms of heating and cooling. And so when you talk about the definition of energy efficiency, it means to use less energy to get the same task done. And I'll show you some examples of that. Light bulbs. Our incandescent bulbs were 5% efficient. They used 5% of their energy to create light, and 95% of that energy went to heat. And now our light bulbs, the LEDs, are 90% efficient. So 90% of that energy is going towards creating your light versus 10% going off to heat. And we'll see this in many things in our lives that, you know, they're conveniences, but they do waste a lot of energy, and we're getting better at things. But cars are terrible. So you look at a car engine, you know, the original engines were 15 to 20% efficient. New cars are 30% efficient when we're talking about combustible engines. Now, when you go over to an electric powered vehicle, that's a different story. But again, very inefficient when it comes to the use of their energy. Converting the gas to moving power in a modern car, 30% of that gas is going to move in the car. 70% goes to heat. And then now looking at our heating appliances. If you have a natural gas furnace, you can see as high as 98% efficiency. If you get a condensing boiler, or sorry, condensing furnace, it can capture some of that waste heat and you can get to 98%, but you can never be 100%. There's always going to be a loss to light and other efficiencies, but 98% is the highest you'll ever get. It'll never be 100. And propane furnaces, similar thing. Now, when you look at a heat pump, they can be 300 to 500% efficient. And you say, how is that possible? You know, how can it be more than 100%? The reason is because a heat pump doesn't create heat. It just transfers heat from one space to another. So we all know from grade 12 physics that you can't create, create or destroy energy, right? So we're transferring it from one space to another. Is this a heat pump? This is one part of a heat pump. This is an outdoor unit. But this is definitely a telltale sign that someone has a heat pump. So putting most simple form, a heat pump is an appliance that transfers energy from one space to another. So this simple drawing here is showing you that you have an outdoor unit, and what it's doing, it is pulling heat from the outdoor air, and then it's sending it through the refrigerant into the indoor unit, which will then discharge that heat. So how's it done? Well, your refrigerator and your freezer run on the same principle. Your refrigerator doesn't create heat. It actually just removes heat from inside the box. So you look at your refrigerator and it might be, you know, 5 degrees and whatnot. It's because it's pulling heat out of that space. It's not cooling it, it's removing the heat. And your freezer, same thing, just to a greater extent. It's removing more heat to create temperatures below zero. And so you think, well, how is that possible? And when you talk about outside and it's winter, how are you pulling heat out of the air? Well, there's always heat in the air. If there's no heat in the air, then it's absolute zero, which is negative 273 Fahrenheit, right? And everything stops at that point. Nothing moves, no molecules, nothing. But above those temperatures, there are heat. And with the technology using the refrigeration cycle, you're able to capture some of that heat and transfer that through the refrigerant inside. So this schematic here gives a very elementary view of what a heat pump system is like. So on one side, you have your condenser, and then the other side, you have your evaporator. So you have 2 coils, and a compressor pressurizes the refrigerant from a low temperature, low pressure vapor to a high pressure superheated vapor. And then this passes through one of the condensers, and then it condenses and exhausts heat. Then it becomes a cool liquid. Then it goes through an expansion valve where the pressure abruptly drops, causing it flash evaporation. And this process absorbs heat. So that's what it'll be doing on the outside in the winter. And then from the air going across the evaporator, that will get rid of the excess heat, and then it'll go back to its cycle again. Now, because the refrigerant changes state at negative 29 C, by decreasing the pressure, we can cause vaporization or evaporation. And this is what allows us to capture and distribute heat through these systems. So what makes heat pumps so great? What makes them the champ? And that is their ability to vary their capacity and reverse their cycle. So there's something called the COP. And this is the coefficient of performance. And this is not a term that many people would know if they're not in the HVAC industry. But this is taking that efficiency number, whether it be 98% or 300%, and putting it as a coefficient. So you'll hear numbers like a COP of 3 or a COP of 3.5 or 2. And so this is talking about that 300% to 500%. So when you're looking at a electric resistance heater, it has a COP of 1 because you have 1 kilowatt in and 1 kilowatt out. So unlike conventional systems, which only cycle on off, so your furnace, you set your thermostat, your furnace kicks on, gives you as much heat as it can, because it can only give you one temperature, gets you up to that set point, and then it shuts off. And so that is, that's going to be up and down and up and down. It'll hit set point, it'll drop, and then when it gets certain degrees below, it'll kick on again. So you get the hot and cold. And depending on how leaky your house is, that can be uncomfortable because you feel cold when the heat's not blowing. Excuse me. Now with a heat pump, and this is heat pump technology, what it does is it hits that set point and then it continues, but it will lower its operating frequencies, operating speed. So what it likes to do is just coast at that set temperature. So you're constantly getting a flow of air, you're constantly getting a feeling of comfort, and it's using its energy as efficiently as possible because it's not having to go through the energy wasting process of starting up again. It just keeps going, but it goes at a very low speed. Now, this graphic gives a better example of what I'm referring to with regards to how the systems run. So your gray car here, that's going to be your furnace. You know, it ramps up, gets to the top of the hill, and then comes straight down, stays off for a little while, comes back up, and just goes through that cycle over and over again. And depending on how your system's size, it could be doing that a lot or a little. Where again, a heat pump system is going to get up to that nice comfortable zone and just cruise along. So which car would you rather be in? Now I mentioned, you know, the heat transfer is done through the refrigerant. There's other ways to transfer heat, obviously air. So when you're running air through a duct, you're transferring heat through the duct and through the air. Also, if you have a hydronic system, if you have radiators, you're transferring the heat through the water, or the energy through the water. But a refrigerant is the most efficient way. So you can tell just by the size of the conduits here. And this is again, a small example where, you know, to carry the same amount of energy through any amount of distance, you would need a 36-inch diameter duct for air. For water, you need a 2.5-inch pipe. And for refrigerant, you can get down to a 3/4 pipe to carry the same amount of energy. So here now, we're looking at heating costs. And we have oil, electricity, propane, heat pump, and gas. So gas has been historically low, but we'll see those start to rise with the increase in the carbon tax. But, you know, just looking at this graph here, you can see oil obviously the highest, electricity next, propane. This is an old chart, so propane probably has now pushed itself to the highest point because I've heard it's been a 300% increase over the past few years. But a heat pump operating at an average of 2.5 COP is still very close to gas. And even though that's at a higher price, because it has a higher efficiency, if you're talking about over the whole heating season, it is very close to operating a natural gas system. So close, in fact, that NRCan did a study. This is the cover of the document that was completed last year, 2020. No, sorry, it was completed in 2020. It was through the pandemic. And so they looked at the operational costs of heat pumps versus other fossil fuels. And so they use their archetype homes to see, really what is that operational cost across Canada if you were going to switch over to heat pump from one of the other fossil fuels. Would it be detrimental to your monthly bills? And the results were quite positive for heat pumps. So you can see that there's only 2 cities in the red where it ends up costing more to run a heat pump, and that's because their cost of natural gas is actually cheaper. But everywhere else, if you ran a heat pump versus running a natural gas system, you would be ahead at the end of the year in your monthly bills. And it goes without saying, it trounces oil and propane.
Stephen, there was a question that came into the chat. Can I just interrupt you for a sec?
Sure.
Oh, someone's answering it for them.
Okay.
It was what does MJ stand for?
Oh, megajoules. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Megajoules.
Thank you.
This chart here is versus oil. And so this is showing if someone got rid of their oil system, they didn't happen to do propane for whatever reason. They didn't include propane in the study, but again, we know where propane is right now. So it would be probably, I don't know, it would be similar to this, if not greater. But these are the savings that people would have switching off oil and going to a heat pump system. So the COP. With a heat pump, the COP is going to deteriorate as the temperature gets lower. As it gets colder out, the system has to work harder to capture more heat. So therefore, it's going to be less efficient. It's going to use more energy to try to capture that heat to maintain whatever the set point is. But as you can see, the red line is the heat pump line. And then in blue, we have electric resistance. So that will always be 1. And then we have propane underneath, which would be around 90, well, depending on your system, it could be, if it's an older system, it could be 85%, it could be 95%, and oil below that. But as you can see, this heat pump's always going to have a higher efficiency. It's always going to have a higher efficiency, and even down to -30. It's still above the COP of 1. So we'll talk a bit about carbon emissions. So according to Natural Resources Canada, buildings are the largest source of emissions in the majority of our populations. So the sooner that we retrofit a lot of these homes, the sooner that we can bring down our carbon emissions. And then space heating nationally is 60%. So our carbon price is going to increase $15 per year up to $170 by 2030. So I'm sure, well, natural gas has already gone up. Propane, obviously, we know has gone up. And so this is going to, again, really swing people over to looking for other options to heating and cooling their space. So let's talk a bit about products and some of their features. So with our systems, with our cold climate systems, our low ambient systems, sometimes they're called hyperheat. Our brand name is Zuba. So if you've ever heard of these things, we guarantee 100% output at -15. So whatever the rated output of that unit is, it'll give you 100% of that at -15. And then it'll give 80% at -25. And as I showed before, it'll still have a COP above 1 at -30. And so this is really what you want to look at when you're choosing a system, is how much heat is it going to be able to give you at the winter design temperature. And for a good portion of our population, that's around -20, but it can swing down to -24. But we're not talking about wind chill. We're always talking about dry bulb temperature. But some systems will say they'll work down to -25. That's fine, they'll work, but then what sort of heat are they giving you at that low ambient temperature? And that's very important, because obviously if it's only giving you 50%, that's not going to cut it for you. And so this graph here is just showing, again, the system maintaining a good performance level above various other systems that are out there. And as I mentioned before, wind chill is not a factor. This is something we hear a lot in our weather reports, but the systems only see what the actual temperature is. And when you go through weather data, you see that it doesn't actually get that cold all the time. And if it does, it's only for a short period of time. So the temperature is constantly varying, but even when it drops to -25, it might only be for an hour. So, you may not feel that difference, especially in your house, especially in the middle of the night. If it drops to -25 and your system's just able to cut it, you're still not going to notice because it'll be for an hour and then it'll jump back up. So again, these are things that people have said, well, it gets -30 here and the system won't be able to handle it. But actually, there's installations in the Yukon, there's installations in northern Alberta, there's installations on the East Coast. Quebec has many installations. So, it's been proven over and over again that heat pumps can work in our climate, especially now that we have cold climate systems. Products and features, easy installation. HVAC contractors now are getting very familiar with these systems, so there's not much of a challenge there. Inverter-driven compressors are modulating compressors, so they can ramp down. So what that means is that even if you have a high capacity system, but it only has to work, say in the shoulder season when it's not all that cold, it can ramp itself right down to about 10%. You have great control over your comfort because, again, it has varying capacity. With the indoor units, with the wall-hung units, you have washable filters, hyperheat, which means you're low ambient, and your ultimate energy efficiency.
Steven?
Yeah.
You had a question come in on the chat.
Sure.
Do you need a secondary heat source for the really cold days?
Good question. So we say no, but it depends where you are. So it's all based on your window design temperature. If your window design temperature is below -25, you could get away with using a cold climate system. And I have an example of a house in Campbellford, which is east, somewhere close to Kingston. They have a Zuba system, a 1970s house, and they don't use any backup, and they've had no problems. But for safety, security, the 1 in a million winter storm, sure. And so we have electric coils that we pair with our system. You could also have a hydronic coil that you can pair with the system for that, that one day that it may drop a little bit beyond the system's ability. The system's going to keep running, but it, at -30, say, it won't be giving the output that you require. But like I said, those are usually for very short periods, so usually not a problem. I know I'm running long on time here, so I'm going to blaze through some of the product here. So this is a wall-hung unit. This is typically what most look like. This is one of the newest ones that has 100% capacity to -20. And of course, they come in varying capacities. These are units that would sit in the ceiling. The one on the left would need a 2x2 space. It's called a 4-way cassette. But the one on the right can fit in between the joists. So in anybody's standard home, instead of having a vent in the ceiling, you could have one of these sit in between the joists and distribute your heating and cooling. And then the unit on the left is a slim duct unit. So this is something that would be put into a bulkhead, and then you could duct from it. So duct some 4 or 5 inch duct to various spaces, say on the second floor, or maybe a part of the house that's not getting good distribution from a central system. And then the unit on the right is a vertical or a multi-position air handler, where that could actually sit where the furnace was. And so this is, you'll see this in the project that was done in the Chippewa-Latans community after this. And this unit here is a floor unit. So this typically could go in the place of a rad, but it sits on the wall near the floor, and again, distributes your heating and cooling. This image here is showing you the different ways units can connect. So a lot of times, in many cases, a one-to-one, because the person or the homeowner only wants, maybe their sunroom or a far-off bedroom. So it's a one-to-one system. But then you can also have a multi-split system where it has a single condenser outside and you connect to multi indoor heads. And then obviously you could do a one-to-one with an air handler and then run it through ductwork. So it just depends on the space and the situation and what makes the most sense. As I mentioned before, Zuba is our brand name. So Zuba Central, centrally ducted, Zuba Multi, the multi-split, Zuba Single is the wall hung units, and the Zuba Single Plus is that newest one with 100% at -20. So here's just showing one of the air handlers. This would probably be an apartment, maybe a townhouse. The air handler sits in a little mechanical closet, connects to the ductwork, and pushes air through the space. This is a project in Toronto where the homeowners split the home up into 3 separate apartments. The condenser's there on the left. And then, of course, you can hook multiple indoor units up, so then all the spaces had their own different controls. And this is an image of the floor-mounted unit on a wall. Installation. These units can go on the wall on brackets. They can sit on the ground on a stand. The only real caveat is that they need to be elevated enough to keep away from the snow. You don't want the snow building up against the fans, because then obviously they won't be able to push the air out or move air over the coil. And so that would have to be cleared. So we recommend at least 2 feet off the ground. And then the good thing about heat pumps is that there's no ventilation required. No, when you have a furnace, there needs to be an exhaust of some kind. So there's no clearance issues. They can be put right under a window. They're very quiet. I have one on my back patio. I can sit on my patio furniture in front of it while it's running and still have a perfectly normal conversation. So this is the home I spoke about in Camelford, 1973 home, bungalow style, and they were on oil and decided to get off oil, switched over to a heat pump system. This is the unit installed in the home and the condenser in the back, and haven't looked back since. It happens to be a 3-ton system, and they've claimed that they've saved 60% based on their previous bills. This is Trinity again Co-op in Newmarket, 92 residential units. They all had electric baseboard heating. They retrofitted with 2.5 and 3-ton multi-split systems, so they have multiple heads inside going through the various spaces. And they've had over 50% reduction in their energy bills. Bruce County Social Housing in Kincardine, they had electric furnaces, which they replaced with heat pumps, 3-ton central systems, so still going through ducts, but they had over 50% in their energy costs. And we've already seen these images. This is a home in Toronto. This is in Harvard Village, a Century home. So, a home that is typically very leaky. There hasn't been any upgrades to the exterior. This individual has a centrally ducted unit that they put in the basement, but because the basement is very low ceiling, they had to put it horizontally. And then they have a single unit upstairs on the 3rd floor, just to deal with that space. And again, very happy. And then this is just an aerial view of a new construction with heat pumps on the balcony. And I've brought it to the end. Open to questions. No one has any questions?
Yes, I've got a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm just trying to envision how you replace. You've got a gas furnace inside, and you can. Yeah. So if I wanted to replace that gas furnace, I could put a heat pump outside the house and then run piping into a air handler inside, which would then tie into my ductwork and carry it through the house. Is that
right? So. Yeah, so your furnace is an air handler, right? It's got a fan in the bottom. It's got well, it's not a coil. It's you got your burner. Yeah, your burner sits on top of your fan, And then if you have air conditioner, the coil would sit on top of that. So that whole big box would move. You'd put in a heat pump box, so an indoor air handler, and the refrigerant lines would run outside to that outdoor unit, and that would be your system.
Okay. Now, so I couldn't have a heat pump inside, or I would have to have somehow, I'd have to run some coils outside, but that's,
Well, so just like your gas pipe has to come into the house,
Yeah.
your refrigerant lines are going out to go. So it's a two-piece system. So
Okay.
you've got that outdoor unit that has the big fans in it.
Yeah.
And then you got the indoor unit that is distributing your heating and cooling to your space.
okay. No, okay, I've got it. So that's quite clear. So, so I couldn't use any of the gas furnace parts as a handler.
No,
You couldn't.
no, not compatible.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to check the chat and make sure we're not missing anything. Oh, I've got another question here. Several, actually, they're in the chat.
Okay, good.
What is the cost to switch over if you have an oil furnace?
That's a tough one. Obviously, we don't do the install of the equipment. I can tell you to install a 40, so a 3.5 ton system, it's going to be around $20,000. So that should include the removal of the existing system. But with oil, I know it might be a bit of more challenge because you have the tank, and depending on where the tank is, so there's complexity with that. But there is the Greener Homes Grant, which offers a $5,000 rebate depending on the system. So that helps offset that. But you're budgeting anywhere from 15 to 20,000.
Great. And then someone said, I may have missed this. AFUE is a rating of the furnace system?
AFUE, yeah. What does that stand for? But it's the
Actual functioning.
I don't remember the acronym. But what
It's its efficiency when it's running, right?
Yeah, it has to do with the efficiency of the system, yes.
I popped the definition in the chat for you guys there. Annualized fuel utilization efficiency.
Right.
There we go.
I know, that one, exactly that one.
Someone asked who could do the install in London, and there are a few dealers. Mitts Air, Donaldson Heating and Cooling. Do you know of any more, Stephen?
Orzek Heating and Cooling. I mean, there's a lot of contractors in London. So I can name off quite a few, but you can definitely reach out to me or go through Marianne, and we can definitely get you in contact with some reputable contractors that can give you some quotes.
We can follow up with some links in the follow-up email that'll go out after this webinar tomorrow. We'll send out some local companies for you folks that are looking.
Awesome. I think I'm going to move along, and then if there's further questions for the second speaker, we'll still have time. So Stephen, thank you very much for your time. If there's nothing, if no one has any last minute questions, this is your last chance.
Going, gone. Okay, thank you very much for having me. I hope I enlightened some of you, and good luck, and thank you again.
Thanks very much. We are going to bring on our next speaker, who is going to speak about geothermal systems. Jim Bolger is out of Waterloo Energy Products, where he owns and operates that business, promoting energy environmentally friendly heating and cooling options, and has installed over 2,500 systems. So he's also on the Ontario Geothermal Association board and was a past president of said board. So he's a good authority on the subject. Jim, are you ready to put your screen up?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
We seem to be getting a little feedback there, Jim. Are you on to your account or something?
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I don't have any screen to offer other than just a little bit of input after Steve's presentation. But thanks, Steve, for your presentation. I just wanted to offer a little bit of, Steve went into a high level of complexity about how the system works and whatever, and I just like to offer a little bit of input. We've installed, as you've alluded to, about 2,500 geothermal systems across the province and hundreds of air source heat pump systems. And in simplistic terms, a lot of our customers come to us with the challenge that they want to do something about climate change mitigation and carbon reductions in their homes. And any heat pump will help accomplish that goal to a large extent. In fact, at site, there's zero carbon emissions with either of those systems. There's a little bit of added efficiency that comes with geothermal. In a rural environment with a lot that, you know, I would say in simplistic terms, half an acre or larger, you can put in a lot of cases what they refer to as a horizontal loop, which you can do with a standard excavator. In an urban environment, geothermal becomes a more costly endeavor because of the cost of drilling vertical. Like as an example, in my home, I live in Waterloo, Ontario. With the heating load that was, you know, calculated for my home, I needed a 4-ton geothermal system. And I had to drill 4 holes in my backyard 180 feet deep, which comes at a cost. So in an urban environment, I would say in simplistic terms, that air source heat pumps become the heat pump of choice because of the cost and the economics involved with it. In a rural environment, geothermal, because it has an added level of efficiency, can accomplish just a little bit more in terms of efficiency and consequently operating cost. Just to give context, compared to propane, oil, and straight electric heating, a geothermal system will save 80% on operating cost, where an air source heat pump, just because it loses a little bit of efficiency at design temperatures, as Steve was alluding to, their savings would be somewhere in that 60 to 70%. At the end of the day, for most people, the added benefit of operating costs, efficiencies, in conjunction with zero carbon at site, is a great equation to help them make the decision on, you know, choosing a heat pump as opposed to fossil fuel based system. The average home, and again, I'm oversimplifying it perhaps, but the average home would be somewhere in that 4 to 6 tons of carbon emissions as a result of using a fossil fuel based system on a yearly basis, compared to zero at site with either the air source heat pump or the geothermal. And the added benefit with geothermal is just a little bit greater operational cost savings, because you're rather than trying to extract heat energy out of the air, you're extracting heat energy out of the ground. And the ground temperature year round in most parts of our province, other than the north, of course, would be somewhere in that 8 to 10 degrees Celsius year-round basis. So your ability to extract energy out of the ground and consequential energy efficiency is far greater with geothermal than it would be with air source in extreme situations. Did you hear me?
Yep, thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions for Jim? Okay, we're going to show a video that came from the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation retrofit project that we've been working on. And we can see the units going in and get a bit of a visual for that.
All right, I'll get her going here. Marianne, just let me know if you can't hear anything or anything again.
My name is Nolan Stenson. I work with Donaldson Home Services. We are here today to remove the traditional burning of fossil fuels furnace and air conditioner and moving towards the air source heat pump, which runs solely on electricity and removes the need for fossil fuels. Traditional homes, they rely on natural gas to heat your home. This house, given its location, does not have the natural gas running underneath the home, so it relies on 2 tanks that hold propane. Propane is obscenely expensive in comparison to natural gas, so the need to move away from that is greater in this area. The air source heat pump obviously doesn't use any natural gas or propane at all. It relies solely on electricity, which will in long-term save them a lot of money. So a common misconception with air source heat pumps is that you lose the luxury of having air conditioner. That is not true. It'll work just like it did before. The convenient thing about the Zuba made by Mitsubishi is everything can still attach to the existing ductwork. A traditional air source heat pump system will have a wall-mounted unit that hangs on the side of the room and provides you with both your heating and air conditioning, whereas the Zuba connects right into the ductwork again. So you don't lose any of the luxury of having your air conditioning while also saving money for your heating bill. So just like everything else in terms of heating, the air conditioning side is also much more efficient. The traditional air conditioner system that was here pre-existing was a 13 SEER. The SEER rating is the governing body that dictates the efficiency of the equipment. The higher the SEER number, the more efficient the unit is. So we have now gone from a 13 SEER and we're getting close to a 20 SEER. So it's going to be much more efficient and it will be easier on the wallet when the electricity bill comes in. Another concern with an air source heat pump is how low the unit will operate at an efficient manner to provide heat for the home. The Zuba can operate up to 80% of its efficiency down to negative 35 degrees Celsius. We don't often experience that sub-zero temperature in southwestern Ontario. It happens very, very rarely, but the unit will provide sufficient amount of heat to keep them comfortable in negative temperatures. All right, so here we can see the system is installed and up and running. As you can plainly hear, it is much quieter than the traditional forced air system. And rather than having the furnace in the basement and your forced air system outside, this will do your heating and cooling all in one. This is the new indoor unit that connected directly to the existing ductwork that was here with the traditional forced air system. So this is your blower at the bottom, which moves the air through the home, the coil on the inside that will effectively heat and cool using the outdoor unit, and the electrical backup if it goes below negative 30, excluding wind chill outside if it's ever needed. Now with this new system in place, the client can experience not just comfort improvements with a full modulating system, but also precision humidity control, as well as lowered in cost to operate the system. Over here, we have the ERV, which is your energy recovery ventilator. In the summertime, it is going to exchange air from the outside to introduce it to the inside, improving the indoor air quality. And in the wintertime, it's going to do the same thing, but at a little bit higher velocity, which will effectively remove some of the humidity. It is not standard in a home. They are becoming a little more popular especially a new build, which it is now a code requirement to have one of those units, as when you increase the efficiency of your home, the humidity does not have a chance to escape, and that's why they are required. It's important for everybody to start at least considering this as an option to move forward to. As convenient as natural gas and burning fossil fuels is, we understand that there is a finite supply of it, so eventually we will run out. The sooner we can get ahead of the game and start jumping onto this technology, the better. As we know, with new technology comes a higher price point. However, the government is providing some incentive to help ease that pain. They are running the Greener Homes grant through the federal government, which can get you up to $5,000 as a rebate for implementing one of these systems in your home.
Thank you, Jamie. A question came up in the chat for Jim. Graham asks, are there any resources to help with a preliminary design of ground source systems?
So with the design of system, like I'm always encouraging people, and it works particularly well right now with the Greener Homes program. If you get a quality auditor, and I encourage you, depending on the area you're in, it's worth to ask advice of, like, we have certain people we recommend that come in and do a full assessment of a home, depending where you are located, that will do a better job than others on the auditing process. So if you do an accurate assessment of your home or building to calculate the heating load in your current conditions, and then also if the auditor is doing their job correctly, they will identify areas that you can improve your building envelope to perhaps reduce the heating load. Once the contractor has that information on existing condition and your improved condition, based on doing, could be things like attic insulation or insulating around basement walls, replacing windows, a whole gamut of potential things, you can properly size that system to look after the heating load of your home and cooling with the properly sized system. And it's amazing how many people historically in our industry, people have had the philosophy that bigger is better, and it's a huge problem. Steve was alluding to that in his presentation, where if you have an older furnace as an example, and its size way larger than it needs to be, what happens is your thermostat's normally on your, directly above where your furnace sits in the basement on the main floor of a house. And an older style furnace that's a single stage unit, it's oversized. It'll come on when it calls for heat. It'll only run for 5 minutes, 10 minutes in some cases, heat up to set point at the thermostat, and then the rooms on the extremities of your house, which are typically, in most people's cases, their bedrooms. The furnace never runs long enough to heat up the ductwork running to the extremities of the house, and therefore you're always cooler in the winter on the upper floor of a two-story home. And the same thing happens in air conditioning. If your air conditioning is a little oversized, it'll come on, it'll cool down again at the thermostat location and run for only 5-10 minutes, cool the place down to reach set point, and doesn't run long enough to properly dehumidify the home. And you can feel more comfortable in air conditioning, as an example, at 25 degrees with the humidity level low as compared to 20 degrees with high humidity still. So that's where the variable speed equipment with air source heat pump and with geothermal with the 2-stage equipment can really go a long ways towards improving the comfort level in the home, dealing with humidity in the summer. So that's very important as part of the process for properly sizing a system to look after your heating and cooling needs.
There was a quick question that got settled in the chat, and it was in regards to having air filters and dehumidifiers into the system as you would with a gas furnace. And the answer is yes, you can have those incorporated into the air handler unit. We probably have time for one more question if any. Oh, we've got one. The unit that is supposed to be in the new builds in the video, are they worth the price? So that was an ERV. Who wants to take that one?
I will. So really what you have to think of them as is a fresh air device. So with your furnace, with even our heat pump systems, you're not getting fresh air in the house. It's just recirculating the air. So it's conditioning the existing air in the home. So they make a big difference in that they temper the air that's coming in. So you can open your window, obviously, to get a fresh air. But if it's cold outside, now you're letting in cold air. And then in the summer, if it's hot, humid air outside, you're letting that in the house. Now you got to run the conditioner longer, vice versa. So when you have one of these units, they're, like I said, it's better to call them a fresh air device. They will actually exchange heat through the air that's coming into the air that's exhausting. What it really does is it'll take the heat from the exhaust air and put that into the incoming air, so that it'll temper that air. And it can also do that with humidity. So if you've got humid air inside, it will transfer that to the incoming air. So it wants to balance. That's ideally what it wants to do. But yeah, they're definitely well worth it, because it's indoor air quality. If you just have a sealed house, windows always closed, recirculating the air, especially if anybody's coughing or sick, whatever, you're just spreading the germs around to everyone else. So if you can introduce fresh air into the space, it does make a difference. That's my long-winded answer.
I believe that particular unit was about $3,000 installed. That home didn't have any other ventilation either, so there was no stove fan and there was no bathroom fan, so it's a bit of an alternative to those as well, which kind of helped justify the cost for that. Okay. If more questions come in, I will happily take them, but I just want to take a moment to thank the guest speakers and sponsors for the series, and remind you that we have 3 more sessions coming up next week on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 5:30 until 6:30. And if you have any questions at all about the project, or if you'd like to get put in touch with any speakers or anything like that, you can email me. My email's at the bottom there. And Jamie is putting together some links and copies of the presentations and recordings to send out to everyone after the individual sessions and at the end of the series. So thank you all very much for your time and for wanting to learn about the new technologies available. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you.